gentlemen. Oh, is this who? Yes, Kabel.
Yeah.
Mr. I thought it was Class. And
No,
then I saw it's. Is it Khas?
It's Kas, yeah.
Khas.
Yeah, more like Kas. Yeah, that's how you pronounce it, yeah.
Okay, Khas. And is this South African? Kabelo is South African.
It got naturalized over the years, but over decades, but it is South African.
That's a very
now, yeah.
diplomatic response. Yeah, Kabelo, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hey, you guys, man, I tell you, if it is not the professor who brings a mound of paper, it is Kabelo who also brings such a mound of paper. But before we go on, Kabelo, are you going to take the oath or are you going to affirm?
I'll take an oath, Chair.
Right, Kabelo Kas is the evidence you are going to give to me the truth, the whole truth and nothing else but the truth. If that is so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you very much. Let's cut to the chase. You know, it's now Thursday, and I already am thinking weekend, but I have to do justice. I believe that you will be making responses to allegations that were made by Kankateko Balati and Pandiso.
Correct.
And Siloa.
Correct.
And Ashwell Prince.
Correct, Chair.
Yes. Now, as I say, you know, your affidavit is before me. You are welcome to structure your presentation any way you want, now that you understand where you will be coming from, what are you going to be meeting by way of allegations. And you must approach this in the spirit of me seeking your assistance insofar as you will respond to allegations that have been made, which you feel, A, need some explanation, B, some outright refutation, or even C, a contextualization. So the floor is yours. You can start right away. I was just making a suggestion as to how you could approach your testimony, but you are very much welcome to approach it the way you would feel comfortable with.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll go systematically based on all the allegations made against Titans Cricket and NCU as well. But maybe let me start by introducing myself.
Yes.
Obviously, Kabelo Kas. I hail from Pretoria. I live in Centurion. Grew up in a township called Soshanguve, which is further north of Pretoria.
Soshanguve?
Soshanguve,
Oh,
yes.
yes.
Yeah. My capacity today is chairperson of Transformation and Ethics within Titans Cricket and NCU.
You are a bold man to want to tackle that kind of thing.
I suppose. And I'm an independent director for the franchise as well.
Okay.
I'm actually a full-time professional employee, but obviously serve in the sport of cricket as well. As you know, it's a love that I've had ever since I was a young boy. I've played cricket over 20 years in Soshanguve and had opportunities to play for the province as well, Northerns, within the school structures. I was also involved at a very tender age to pretty much coach young kids in Soshanguve and also coached younger kids for the province, under 11, under 13, in my early 20s. So I'm just trying to say, Chair, this sport is very close to my heart.
Yes.
And I thank you for actually this opportunity to pretty much contribute, and hopefully my contributions will move the game forward.
Yes.
I have to also say, Chair, that some of the allegations came from people that I know personally. Mr. Ethan Balati is pretty much my age, and we played in the same era. Mr. Aaron Pangiso, I take him like a brother. We grew up together in Soshanguve, and there were times when I actually had to captain him as well within the team. So you can imagine this is almost personal to me, obviously standing here representing, Titans and Northern's Cricket Union from a transformation and ethics perspective. So, Chair, I will start with allegations brought forward by Mr. Ethan Balati first. And the first allegation that he brought forward is that he was not earning too much, he was earning little, and his contract was about 60,000 rands per annum, and he knew that white players were earning more than him. So that's their first allegation. And I think to respond to that, Chair, obviously representing the union, is that Ethi, at the time that he was earning around 60K per annum, he was a young person, he was a young professional. He was what we called a rookie in cricket terms, which is pretty much somebody who's just, entering the scene. So given what he earned, it was certainly fair to his status as a player, a young sort of rookie coming into the team at the time. And I must also state that during his 14-year career with the Titans, his salary then progressed, to decent levels, which I've shared with you, Chair, with that table that I've shared with the Commission. Actually, I can even state that for 3 years within the 14 years, he was actually the highest earner within the Titans. Now, this is across race. And most of the time, he was either fourth or third or even tied second. I can state that in 2010-2011 season, he was the highest earner out of 16 contracted players, and 2011-2012, he was the third highest remunerated player out of 21 players. Again, going back to the first, 2012-2013 being the highest out of 17 players. So given his 14-year span and the remuneration that he earned, there's actually, proven facts that we've actually compiled from our financial office, from our SACA office, and from pay slips that we still have in our archives to actually support this argument, Chair. I'll take questions as I go from the two of you, Advocate.
Yeah, but I mean, I suppose one of the big questions that I would need to ask from you, given that you have known him for all this time, and given that you are saying the version that he gave me when he came to testify is incorrect, why do you think he's doing this? Or why would he be doing this? And taking into account that, one of the flaws of this process is that he was not cross-examined because there was no, I don't have time, and we haven't provided for cross-examination. Even if it is a limited one, like you had in the Zono Commission, in the Marikana Commission. What would you think is the reason that he came to say the things that he said, which are not in sync with what you are telling me?
Chair, to be honest, I wouldn't be too sure. I can pretty much, speculate that perhaps when he, at the time when he got hold of the information that other players are earning well, perhaps he was right, but he was obviously a rookie at the time. Obviously, there would have been, players who are earning a lot more.
Would he? Are you saying that what he was earning was commensurate with the stage at which he was in terms of experience and in terms of membership of the club.
Absolutely, Chair. So how the salary scales would go, it would pretty much be a curve, and that's pretty much with every player, that you would start somewhere here, and once you sort of mature in your playing years, and you play within your prime years, then obviously you would hit your ceiling, and ultimately sort of declining as you get older within the game. So I think Mr. Balati is no difference to that sort of graph. But initially, definitely. I mean, the supporting documents that I have here, it shows that when he was still young, in his third season, he was actually the 11th highest paid player out of the 16. So,
were the white players who would have been of a similar age and similar levels of development in South Africa. I mean, in your club, who would have been earning more than he was, which probably would have been the reason why he felt that race was a factor, and that he was being discriminated against because he was not treated on the same basis as white players of a similar stature were being dealt with.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Chair. So obviously back in the day, this is a predominantly white sport, and back in the day, the quota sort of numbers went like today. So I can imagine Mr. Balati found himself with perhaps one or two more players of color at the time. So meaning that most players would be white. But at the same stage that he was playing, in terms of the earnings, Chair, I've shared a table here that shows sort of earning levels per race, and it pretty much shows that there were actually players more or less at this level, earning around the figure of 60,000 in 2006-2007 season.
And where's that in what page is that?
So, Chair, that would be page 7 in the...
Yeah.
So if you look at the first column, the second last line where it highlights there was actually a white player in the region of 60,000 as well, as Mr. Balati. So I wouldn't say conclude that he perhaps based his earnings on race. Yeah.
So from this table, how will we be able to see whether the white player was like around the same, in terms of experience, was in the same experience level as him?
Okay, yeah. So it wouldn't show here in terms of experience, but I'm more than happy to pretty much support this at a later stage, just to be transparent. But I think, someone who's been around, he would say no to 60K to play professional cricket. So for me, 60K talks to a rookie type of contract, which is very junior, more like a junior contract. But I'm more than happy to support this if you like, Advocate. Yeah.
No, thank you, Mr. Kass, because I honestly find the table helpful insofar as the breakdown and for us to see the salaries over the years of the different races, but it's not helpful insofar as the allegation that he makes. Okay. And his allegation is that at the time he was earning 60K, and I don't think it disputes. I mean, you've mentioned paragraph 18. It doesn't necessarily dispute and say it was too much or it was too little. He just says there were white players that were earning more, even though he doesn't really disclose whether they were in the same level or not, and that those white players had cell phone contracts and so forth. So insofar as your response, I don't think it sufficiently assists us in seeing whether players that were in the same level were rookies just like him. Were white players who were rookies just like him also earning 60K? And did those players have cell phone contracts which he did not have? So I think that type of support we'll need from you.
No, 100%. I'll give you specifics in terms of the level of experience from a rookie perspective. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kast.
Thank you.
Yes.
May I proceed, Chair?
Yes.
Okay. So the second allegation at play by Mr. Balati, he then speaks to the language of Afrikaans in the change rooms that was used. And everybody knew that he could not speak Afrikaans, or he understood very little of it. So it made him obviously very uncomfortable in that space. So responding to the allegation, Chair, is that in the tenor that Mr. Balati played for the Titans, we had 5 coaches, and all of them were English speaking. Matter of fact, they were English, and understood very little of Afrikaans. And I will name the coaches, from 2000 to 2016. That's Mr. Richard Pybus, Mr. Dave Nosworthy, Mr. Chris van Noordwijk, Mr. Matthew Maynard, who's from England, by the way, and Mr. Rob Walters. So all the coaches, Chair, they are English speaking and English by descent. And we have also included annexures within obviously a submission stating exactly that. So in informal meetings, they will definitely be addressed in Afrikaans, and that being in change room chats and when they were doing fielding drills as well. Perhaps there were obviously Afrikaans spoken within the spaces, and that I would think it would be, a couple of players speaking Afrikaans at a corner, or a group of, players speaking Afrikaans as well. I would think that would happen more in informal settings, given obviously the submissions by the coaches and the fact that they are English. And obviously I can imagine how it made Mr. Balati, feel. So I think that, over the years, it must have affected him, And like I always say, the transformation was always going to be a journey. We all have different sort of backgrounds coming in. So there was a lot of naivety coming into a common space of, diversity and, proper understanding of it. I must note as well that, Pretoria is quite, a bit special. More like Bloemfontein. It's the feeding into cricket, schools, or the feeding schools into the Titans, they're pretty much Afrikaans. We look at AFIS, we look at University of Pretoria, previously mainly Afrikaans University. And, you'd expect, given the backgrounds as well, and that obviously it's a white spot, most players would be Afrikaans speaking. I can confirm, though, based on the evidence that we got from these coaches, that in formal settings, there wasn't any Afrikaans spoken. Yeah.
And Mr. Kast, did you say you said you played for the Titans as well?
No, I played for the provincial structures, school structures, not the Titans. Yeah, okay. But I mean, I'm familiar with the settings. Given that I've played before, I found myself, in a couple of teams being the only black person, or maybe having a few black people in a team as well. And I know how it is, where it can easily switch, to Afrikaans. Obviously, at the time, it just affects you, especially if you don't understand the language. And it may just, maybe affect you as well in the playing field. Yeah. So, is it something that happened that players would speak Afrikaans? Normally, it did, and for me, I think it happened from lack of diversity education perspective. It happened from players being comfortable with their own friends within a team to speak in their own mother tongue. It also happened, by the way, where I would be with my fellow, black brothers within a team where we would speak, in our Venek language. So I really sympathize, obviously, with Ethi, given that I'm a former, cricketer myself. But, from a coach's perspective and formal settings, everything according to the coaches was submitted was communicated in English.
Okay, no problem. Sorry, Jay. Was Mr. Chris van Noordwijk also English speaking?
English speaking, yeah.
Okay.
And also English, yeah. I know it sounds a little Afrikaans, right?
No, not that. It's just that he didn't submit a confirmatory affidavit.
Oh, is it? Okay. Okay, no, he was very English.
The one I the English would call him Van Vuel instead of Ven, so and so.
Yeah, no, I got confused myself by it. But I mean, he's a guy that I know actually within the structures that I got to interact with as well. He speaks, English, yeah. and his English as well.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll move on to the third allegation, where Mr. Balati was playing club cricket, Premier League cricket, for the then Pretoria Technikon, which is TUT now, technology, TUT. Tshwane University of Technology, that's it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. And then he was called a quota player, and an allegation of that one of the players would say to him that if it wasn't, for the color of his skin, he wouldn't have played for the Titans. And which for me, Chair, is I would be offended if I was Ethi. Matter of fact, I would get angry, and simply because if you give Ethi any color any day, he would make any team in the country. He was that good. You don't play 14 years because of the color of your skin. You don't become the leading wicket taker within one of the leading franchises in the country because of the color of your skin. So we then obviously engaged with the structures that were, at the time involved. And that was both, sorry about this. And that was both the then president of NCU, Mr. John Wright, and the cricket operations manager, Edward Khoza. And both of them had no recollection of the incident. However, Ethi, in Mr. Balati, in his own submissions, he does say that the matter was actually dealt with at the time and disciplinary action was taken. So obviously, because the timing was not stated, perhaps obviously the recollection, it must have happened some time back. But knowing the union, having been with it for 4 years as transformation chairperson, an act like this would have happened where it's addressed and an action, a disciplinary action would have been taken against such a player. We've been very firm in our transformation stance. We've revised policy numerous times, trying to make it current and a lot more inclusive. And we have a no-nonsense sort of attitude towards racialism and discrimination of any sort within the union. And to me, like I said, it's personal. Personally, I have experienced some of these things growing up. I know, they do happen, especially in the field of play. Therefore, we try and address it to ensure that the environment is very conducive for a cricketer playing today, and it's a lot more inclusive. Okay, I'll move to allegations 4, Chair.
Yes.
So Ethi, or Mr. Balati, speaks about negotiating contracts and that he was actually inexperienced and young to actually negotiate. And he then alleges that, the system would then take advantage of that. The fact that he's young and inexperienced, that he would pretty much take anything he was offered against, going back to obviously what he used to earn, being little to obviously his counterparts. That's the 4th allegation. And if I may combine allegation 4 and 5, if I may just address allegation 4 and 5 at a go. So allegation 5, he talks about, again, young white players getting better contracts, than him, and getting paid a lot more, even if he was there for 3 seasons with the Titans. So to respond to this allegation, Chair, we've included a statement and an email from the late Mrs. Lombard, who was the then CEO of the Titans, who sent an email to Stan Matthews dated the 3rd of May 2006, who was negotiating on behalf of Mr. Balati. Stan Matthews is the current SuperSport United Football Club CEO. He's a very respected sport agent. He's been in the field for too long, assisting soccer players and some of the cricketers as well, including Mr. Balati. He then negotiated, obviously, a salary for him in 2006, which was fair, given the table that I've shared earlier. So, if I may just read from the affidavit shared by Mrs. Lombard.
Where do we find that?
I beg your pardon. So that's Annexure 7 on the documents.
page 40.
Oh, page 40, yes. So that's pretty much...
Let me just get there.
Okay.
Don't take advantage of my age.
I beg your pardon, Chair.
Yes, I meant that.
It's pretty much at this, salary
It's the
slip.
letter dated the 3rd of May, 2006.
3rd of May 2006, correct?
Yes.
Correct, yes. So you could see, Chair, that there's a cash component of 140,000, which pretty much signifies a 22% increase into his salary, and that's in 2006 and 7. And over and above that, Mr. Balati received a medical aid benefit of 12.898 per annum. And over and above that, his accommodation was also taken care of. And this is obviously over and above the highlighted 140,000 per annum, which on the table doesn't include other sort of benefits that he received. And I must also state that some of the players, if not all white players, did not receive medical aid at the time. So Mrs. Lombard at the time, she took Effie as the one who would require a lot more help, from a financial perspective, and that's why the benefit in accommodation and also included the medical aid as well into it. Okay. So if I may move to allegation 5. So allegation 5 talks to, okay, let me just check here, beg your pardon. So it talks to exactly that white young players would finish school and get better contracts, better than his. I think a demonstration that he obviously got 22% increase, 2006 and 7 with all those benefits that he got in medical aid and accommodation. If you look at the table as well, Chair, he was, by the way, still young. He was around 24, 25. And he was the 11th, not the last one on the list, but the 11th highest paid player. So at that age, you're still young within the system. There'll obviously be senior players who are a lot more credible from performances and a reputation perspective. If there's no questions, I'll move to the next allegation, which is number 6. Okay, so allegation 6, Mr. Balati, alleges that, while other white players were given a lot more playing opportunity, and they were pushed up to the national team to play for the Proteas as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, he was overlooked, and he was actually, and everybody knew, management and the coaches knew that he was actually a better player, including the national selectors of Cricket South Africa. He then goes on to say that, he remembers one occasion where the bowling coach of Cricket South Africa A-side told him that he was to join the team. He was picked for the national team and is to join the national, the training squad. But then the Titans management told his national selectors that he was injured, which, according to him, it was a lie. He was actually fit to play. To respond to that, Chair, we had to engage with the physiotherapist at the time for the Titans, Mr. Ian Repton, to pretty much confirm via email that he does not recall the medical team ever ruling out Mr. Balati for playing for the Proteas at the time. So they never ruled him out and confirmed any injury on Mr. Balati. I have also attached a statement or an email from Mr. Repton. That is, I'll give you the page right now, Chair.
42.
It's 42. Thanks, Advocate Dumisa. That's page 42.
The physiotherapist.
Correct. This is the Titans physiotherapist at the time. So this is pretty much the first part of the response. The second one, we had to obtain a statement from Mr. Brendan Jackson, who was a physiotherapist for Cricket South Africa at the time as well, who then sent us a statement, which is the next page, Chair, which is 43. I beg your pardon, page 44. So Mr. Jackson, in his statement, pretty much affirms that he was not given any mandate to pretty much sort of run fitness test levels on Mr. Balati, or rather he was not selected for the Proteas at the time. That's the two statements that we got from the two physiotherapists that confirm that Mr. Balati was not injured, one, and secondly, he was not part of the plans to tour Zimbabwe with the Proteas at the time, as Mr. Balati had claimed earlier.
So, Mr. Kas, how come Mr. Balati didn't get to play for the national team?
It's a good question, Advocate. I think, look, if Ethi was playing now, well, Mr. Balati would make the Proteas easily. I think a few players became very unfortunate based on the timing and the era that they played in. At the time Mr. Balati played, I think there was a lot of competitiveness in his skill. So talk about fast bowling, he's a fast bowler. At the time, at some point, if Makantini was in the squad, Monde Zondegi was in the squad, Morne Mokel was playing in the team as well. So there were quite a few, a lot of fast bowlers who were playing for the Proteas at the time. Definitely his work and his performances was recognized by being selected for SAA, which is pretty much more like a B-side to the Proteas. But unfortunately, he did not make the Proteas. I would think, and it's an opinion by the way, I would think it's based on having those sort of premium bowlers at the time playing for the Proteas, including even Dale Steyn as well. And a couple of them went on to becoming #1 bowlers in the world. He had stiff competition, I suppose, and that's an opinion from my side. Yeah.
No problem, thank you.
Yeah. But definitely great bowler. He was a stalwart for the Titans, and he contributed massively. Actually, it's quite sad that we hear, discussing, the injustices that he may have experienced at the time, because we take him as one of our heroes. A lot of guys, as I was doing this, sort of investigation within the Titans, they take him as a friend. He's always smiling. He's a friendly guy. Like I said, I know him personally. I think there'll probably be very few people who have an issue personally with Mr. Balati. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Chair, I'll move on to the next allegation.
So before you move on, I think you haven't mentioned the paragraph just above 4.8, where
Okay.
you say that the Titans doesn't have influence in the selection.
Absolutely. And I was going to take a look together with Allegation 7. So we really have no influence whatsoever in who gets selected, for the Proteas. So all we can do is obviously to get the players to be ready to perform for the Titans, to win as many trophies as possible, and for the Titans to be that brand that Cricket South Africa can see as the best pipeline to pull from all the franchises. We can never, and it's never been a culture, to influence up. So we would get an instruction from CSA, from whatever plans they have, based on the performances that the players would have put in at franchise level, to say we would like to, Mr. Balati to join the squad. So we don't play any part in the selections in the Proteas. Yeah. And it goes again with the next allegation 7, where he says that he remembers, to the build-up of the World Cup in 2011, that he was doing very well. And he obviously alleges that he was in the preliminary squad just before it was announced. And he got a call later by one of the selectors to tell him that he was not picked in the final squad because of lack of experience. And, both obviously the final paragraph, Advocate, and this allegation, I think CSA is best positioned to pretty much address this one. Yeah. Okay, I'll go to the next point.
So you say which areas is CSA best placed?
So it's 4.8 on page 13, allegation 7, and the last paragraph on the 4.7, just above 4.8.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, someone like, if he was a selector at the time, Linda Zondia, so he testified earlier, he would be perhaps, I think he was, I'm not sure if he was or wasn't, a convener of selectors. If he wasn't, it would be his, before him, to tackle it. Okay, allegation 8. So this allegation is almost three-way, right? And it's pretty much all about segregation. So the first one being that, the Titans would send black players to black schools during coaching clinics and white players to white schools. And the second allegation within allegation 8 is that the hotel room sharing was a problem, that some of the players didn't want to share a room with him. He would get to reception and he would find his name scratched out. And the last one being the Daki bus, as it was labeled at the time by the players. And responding to all of them, perhaps the first one first being the black players to the black schools. I think the approach was two ways at the time. One, you would expect that a black child will be a lot more inspired by seeing somebody, with more or less the same background as him, as a professional cricketer playing for the Titans at a school, so they can much more relate to them, perhaps coming from the same township in Mamelodi, also Shanguve, whatever township they may have come from. So you would think that it would be a lot more impactful, to those players. And secondly, you had to be conscious as well of the language barrier. So that was the thought process from a Titans perspective, why they actually separated white players to black players in going to the schools. In hindsight, obviously, it didn't sit well with Mr. Balati. Perhaps there's a learning that we can all take going forward, that it doesn't necessarily have a bearing. It shouldn't be, white players to white schools and vice versa as well. But at the time, the thought process was really about language barrier and how impactful it would be in terms of inspiring black kids looking at somebody they can relate to, somebody looking like them who's playing for the Titans now is here to talk to us about cricket.
Which year was this, Mr. Cast? Do you know? I know he doesn't mention it.
I wouldn't be sure. Yeah, I wouldn't be sure.
And what is the current practice now with that?
Yeah, good question. So, I've been in charge for the last 4 years, and I can tell you we've moved forward in a big way. Matter of fact, I can highlight so many changes within the union from an integration perspective. So it's a culture.
No longer a Daki bus.
No, absolutely not. The bus is a lot more integrated. And I think what's nice about it is it's almost natural. So a lot of these players, they can more or less relate from a culture perspective. They go to this more or less the same schools. And even those that are coming from township schools, they are a lot more welcomed within the structures. And simply because, number one, we've created a culture that's very conducive, allowing for any kid coming from any background to almost fit into. And I'm not saying that there's no work still to be done. I'm saying the environment is a lot better and a lot more accommodating than back in the day. Kids would and players would go into any bus, and more often, actually every time, it's actually a mixed race bus. So it never happens. And even that as well, it's not something like that was prescribed that, white players go to that bus and black players to that bus. It was, I suppose, more of a comfort type thing, natural bias, if I may call it that, more comfortable with Afrikaans speaking. And I guess my generation, white people, were a lot more, Afrikaner than, the current generation that are of players. They are a lot more open-minded, they're a lot more English speaking, and they are a lot more accommodative because since they've been playing at school level with, black children, or black players. They've been playing at club level and provincial level with all of them. So it's a new norm, and it almost happens almost naturally. And you want it to get to a point where it's really natural and there's no instructions or quotas to really drive this integration. But I believe we're in the right track to actually get to that point where, and I know there's been a lot within the cricket sort of space, but I'm very positive, and I think there's a lot of changes that have happened over the years. At the time when I played cricket, when I started playing cricket, the environment was a lot more hostile and not as receiving from us playing cricket as it is now. And I can only focus on on the positives and the changes that have happened over the years. So even at the time, it was definitely not prescribed. It's something that the Union Titans and Northerns wouldn't even buy into or even endorse as a prescription to say this is how it's going to be. Matter of fact, sorry about that. If you look at even the hotels as well, we promoted that he would sleep with other white players, except that obviously players would then whoever would have scratched his name out of the list. Which obviously we don't even have any supporting documents to that. Yeah, sorry, Advocate.
No problem. No, thank you for that, Mr. Kaz. So, what did the Titans prescribe that system that white players would go to white schools and black players would go to black schools? Is that system prescribed?
Yeah, look, at the time, I would think, obviously, there would have been a prescription to say, Effie, whoever, you're going to go to these schools, because it had to be planned. Right, for the players to visit those schools. But the logic around it or behind it was obviously what I've explained earlier, to inspire. And it's about intention here, Advocate, to inspire a black child. He can relate a lot more with you than with, it's easy for a black cricket playing kid to say, yeah, but you had the better opportunities because of the facilities you grew up with and the background you have. That's why you made it. But when they see a Mr. Balati or a Aaron Pangiso, they get excited because they can relate. They can then believe. Personally, I believed I can make it in life, in corporate or my career, when I saw my sister, who we grew up in the same sort of environment, making it. And I know that I have no excuse. If my sister is successful, then I can make it. We have the similar background. So it was from that perspective. And again, from a language barrier. Because I'm sure you would be aware that some of the kids at township schools, did not speak, English as much as, they do today. Yeah.
No, thank you so much. And how long has the union had the transformation committee?
I'm not too sure about the duration, but when I took over from the previous board, there was a transformation committee as well. It came as something imposed, I think, from CSA as well, which was good. Transformation has been topical and obviously a focus point for CSA and obviously all franchises. I'll tell you that from a Titans perspective, it's been a very big focus point, but most importantly, sustainable transformation. It's easy to transform, to replace a Yaku with a Kabelo, but can a Kabelo sort of put in the work as well? Will quality of work decline? And we've been focusing in really empowering those to transform with, to be able to sustain their positions, and that being working for the Titans within the structures or even the players as well. I can give you a few examples to show that we've come a long way, and most of this, by the way, happened in my 4 years of being the transformation chairperson, working close with Mr. or Dr. Fowl. I don't know what to call him lately. He's a professor and doctor. He's got so many titles. To really transform and to focus on areas that requires transformation. We have Mandla Mashimbi, who's the Titans coach, and he's black. And it's wonderful because he comes through our structures. Again, is my generation era, my age. I know him very well as well. His assistant coach is a black coach, Jeff Toyana. We have a black president in Mr. Debo Khosiko. We have a vice president of color, Mr. Vederman. We also have the first black African male cricket operations manager, in Mrs. Charlotte Surwadi. And she's wonderful, forget about color. She does her work, and that's the sustainable part. So when you get people ready for positions, can they perform? We're one of the best performing franchises in the country, if I have to say so myself, and we are the most transformed in the last 3 to 4 years, but achieving the best results. And that, for me, is how transformation should be sustainable, and we should contribute and show that, if all given an equal opportunity, we can actually be the best in what we do.
No problem. And when you say you're the most transformed, in what sense?
Maybe I need to be careful in terms of most transformed, but we've been the most transformed over the history of Titans. From a board perspective, it's predominantly black. both coaches being black. Before Mandla, there's never been a black coach before for the Titans. Actually, we're in the semi-finals, by the way. I think they're playing just now, and I'm hoping they win, because I'm cheering for Mandla for obvious reasons, for him to succeed. From a employment perspective within the structure as well, we're probably predominantly black, and we have a couple of senior managers that are black as well, including the stadium manager, Jabu Kubek, who's coming from my township as well, and who's done fantastic work ever since he's taken over. So we believe in equality. We believe in acknowledging that previously disadvantaged should definitely be given the opportunities, but most importantly, empower them and getting them ready for those opportunities.
I think you can proceed, Mr. Kasi.
Thank you very much. Okay. I think I'm in allegation 9 now.
Yes.
Okay, so allegation 9, Mr. Balati recalls that, he was told, and with a few obviously black players, that they are loud. Black people are too loud, they must keep quiet. Another issue that he has was that a black player made a mistake, it would be all over the news, as opposed to a white player not being as protected, by obviously the union. So those are the obviously 2 allegations. I must say that we've obtained a statement by the then, who's actually still the team manager for the Titans, Mrs. Karen Smithers, addressing the allegation about, white players. So I'll briefly explain what happened. So what he's referring to. So 2 things. There was 1 or maybe 2 black players who were involved in really an accident, a drinking and driving case while he was still playing for the Titans. And there was also a white player who was also involved in the same sort of scenario. However, the difference is that the white player was in Australia playing for Brisbane Hits. So that's an Australian, team. One thing in cricket, Mr. Chair, is that there's different seasons or summers allows players to actually play more than 1 league at a time, as opposed to football. So in winter they would play in England, and in some of the seasons, if we were closed here, they would then play in those seasons. So one of these white players, and I wouldn't mention their names to protect their reputations, was involved in an accident there, apparently drinking and driving as well. And it had, at the time, it obviously had nothing to do as far as the Titans is concerned. But I must say that we would like to protect all the players. Matter of fact, we have proved that we actually even protected the black players. We actually chipped in with the legal fees to support this black player who was involved in drinking and driving case by paying his lawyers up front, by the way, to ensure that he's protected in the court of law. It's within our image as well to try and protect all the players, irrespective, because, you cannot run cricket without really funds and sponsors. So it's in our best interest to really protect all the players, irrespective of their color. So we yes, in closing to that sort of allegation, we have protected all the players and the image of the Titans at the time when this incidents occurred. So to address the first one on the same allegation about, black people being loud, it's very unfortunate. For me, it's being naive from a diversity perspective, not understanding different cultures. It's something that we wouldn't even want to, go deep into, but definitely it has to do with education more than anything for somebody to say that, And like I said, there's, there's structures in place, there's programs in place to try and educate, players better today. Okay, allegation 10. So this one, Mr. Balati talks about, the union releasing, or rather requesting black players and colored players to come back early from the winter break to join the squad, yet white players would join in a bit later. So he would question that they would be released and join in later, and when they come back, they would then get first preference from playing. And maybe let me, just piggyback from the previous discussion to say that there's different leagues globally, and players are allowed to pretty much play any league they please or they get an opportunity to play in. So most of these mature players that are known, they take an opportunity to play in England, for obviously monetary reasons and for for experience as well. So they would then, play county cricket in England or club cricket as well. And as a result, they would then ask for permission, which, by the way, their contract sort of has a clause, to sort of ask for that permission. And we would then release them accordingly. So because they would be playing overseas, they would then join the squad a bit later. And those that have not joined those teams would then join the camp, the training camp, earlier on in the pre-season, and simply because the coach would require them to be back early, because they would be rusty, they wouldn't have played any cricket in the off-season. But I think I need to state, most importantly, that Mr. Balati and other few players of color, they have also had the privilege of returning late from playing overseas as well. And that I have included between annexures 2 and 5. If I may just go there. I'll give you the page now, Chair.
Do comments on page 31.
I beg your pardon, this is not the right one that I'm looking at.
Chief, I may assist annexure 11 on page 46 is the release.
Yes, that's the release that I'm looking
on
at.
Page 46.
Yeah, thanks, Advocate Dumisa. Thank you very much. So if you're there, Chair, maybe let me wait for you.
We're looking for Annex 46.
No, it's Annex 11, page 46.
Page 46, yeah.
Okay. Player release for 6 contract. Mm-hmm.
So you'll see the first one, Chair, is a release contract for Mr. Ethan Balati. Mm-hmm. That shows that between the 21st of April 2007 to the 3rd of September 2007, he was released to play club cricket in the UK. So...
is it not 2008? March 2006, September 2008.
Correct, Chair. Correct. So that was line 3 that you're looking at is the contract with the franchise. But if you look at line 6, it talks to the release date.
Yes.
So that's pretty much the off-season period between April and September. So he was released like other players. And if you look at the next page, maybe 2 pages, page 48, annexure 13.
Yeah.
Page 48, it talks again to Mr. Alfonso Thomas, who was a player of color at the time, being released at the same time as Mr. Balati. And you look at, 2 pages down the line as well, Mr. Farhan Behardin, who's a player of color as well, also being released. So this is just to demonstrate that the release and...
When you say who was a player of color at the time, has it since changed? You never know in South Africa, I mean.
Yeah.
People have been... There is a quotation, in a book written by Kada Asman. He had this speech that was made in Parliament where the minister concerned was saying so many coloreds became white, so many Chinese became coloreds, so many Indians. I mean, it was a long list. And I say, the energy that we put into
to these policies was amazing. No, anyway, it's interesting.
So I was saying, are we going back there now?
So there's a differentiation, obviously, between colored and black being both player of color and
hence African. I've never been. I grew at a time when we were at least singular, African, colored, Indian, and white.
Yeah.
But now there's black African because I'm also African and whatever and all of that. And then,
Yeah, interesting definitions.
I'll make that disclaimer when I write the report. Yes.
So, Chair, to continue, we've included this other two contract release just to demonstrate that it was never based on race. Coming back to the training camp, it was pretty much based on contractual obligations and permission that the players would ask for, and then would then release them, as he was also released. And then when he says, obviously, that maybe black players and young players were required to come back early, it's simply because maybe, the experience they had did not attract overseas sort of teams to sort of ask for their services. But, Mr. Balati, as we can see, that he got that opportunity as well to come back later and to play for Warwickshire in England at the time.
But he says here that the worst thing, this is like the third or fourth last paragraph on paragraph 27 that you're responding to. The worst thing is that I played all formats of the game, while some of them, those white players who would be given extra time off, played only one format. Okay, but they earned way more than me, who was always playing week in and week out. I mean, like the reading of this paragraph, and it's something you might have to maybe expand on.
Yeah.
When he talks about extra time off, he doesn't really expand to give it in the context that you've given it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Advocate, what gives it a bit of context is that he opens up in the 4.13 by saying during pre-season. So obviously that talks about off-season, and season starts, let's say, in September. They will generally be required to come back, say July, to sort of work on their fitnesses first. But because the contractual players who would then playing overseas would be contracted until September, they would then join the squad only maybe after a game into the season or even before, and they would just walk into that team as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm very sure that he's referring to the pre-season. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so allegation 11. So Mr. Balati, and I quote, says that I was able to establish that white players earn far more than me from an incident that happened in the change rooms while playing for the Titans. Some players had the habit of opening their pay slips and dropping them on the floor after checking them. One day I was with a couple of guys in the change rooms when I picked up one pay slip belonging to one white player. I picked it up, obviously, with the intention of identifying who it belonged to. To my surprise, I was shocked to discover how much he earned, which was way more than what I earned at the time. And he then obviously, goes on to indicating, let me just check here. Okay, so I think the allegation stops there. But again, I'm going to, always refer back, because this matter has been brought a couple of times in terms of salaries. I'm going to refer back to that, table. Again, it shows, that actually in his last 8 playing years, he's been in the top 4 on average of the highest earners. And 3 of those 8 years, he's been the highest earner. I must say that, Titans is very competitive from a, quality of players perspective. So I can imagine he really competed with great players who would have easily, and some of them actually made the Proteas side, but those who didn't would be contracted with the Titans. He was one of the highest earners, and in 3 seasons, he was actually the highest earner. And I think generally players leave franchises for mainly 2 to 3 reasons. The first one being playing opportunity. So it goes without saying that Mr. Balati actually had the playing opportunity in all formats of the game, most of his career with the Titans. Secondly, they would leave for monetary reasons. If you don't pay them well enough, then they would join another franchise. At the time, Mr. Balati was, hot property, doing very well, taking wickets. Any franchise would have easily taken him if he had raised his hand. In my humble opinion, based on common sense, if Mr. Balati stayed for that long, and given the records that we have, I wouldn't say that we underpaid him in any way. He stayed for 14 seasons, and we show in our records that we actually paid him being one of the highest in the last 8 seasons, and this is factual. Data from our financial office and from the soccer office, which is quite independent, and the pay slips as well. And I will, Advocate, provide you with more, to your point earlier, about the rookie players information. But so as a result, I wouldn't say Mr. Balati was underpaid in any way. Okay, if I move on to allegation 12, Mr. Balati, and I quote, I remember that during 2013, when we qualified to play in India for Champions League, I was one of the best bowlers who took the team to qualify for the Champions League. However, when we arrived in India, I did not play a single game. Before the tournament started, the coach and captain called me on the side and told me that I will not be involved in the tournament. I asked what was the reasons. I was told that I had a bad attitude, that apparently during a middle practice session before we left to India, one of the captains had asked me to do something and I did not follow that instruction. So that's the allegation, Mr. Balati, but when we go to the Champions League, the certain Cricket South Africa contracted players that form part of the structures of Titans, but predominantly would play for the Proteas. So when an opportunity comes for them to actually come back and add value from a franchise perspective, they get considered for selection. At the time, we had 2 players. Morne Mokel was playing with the Proteas. I think Mashan Delange as well was playing for the Proteas at the time. So giving obviously the coach headaches from a selection perspective. But most importantly, I need to note this, that cricket gets very technical from a selection perspective, given the conditions on the day or maybe conditions of a country that you're going to play in. So generally, subcontinent countries like India, you want to play more with slower bowlers because the conditions are conducive for the slower bowlers, spinners and other slower bowlers as opposed to fast bowlers. I can tell you now on the record that Mr. Rob Walters in his affidavit has confirmed that he does not recall having a discussion with Mr. Balati of having any bad attitude before the game, nor did his attitude influence his selection to play in India. It was predominantly based on technical reasons on cricket, based on conditions in India, what would be the best strategy to employ in the 3 to 4 games that they've played in the tournament, which suited slower bowlers. And unfortunately, the national team players then got an opportunity to play ahead of him. So it had nothing to do with attitude. Like I said earlier, Ethi was a like person. Ethi got along with everybody. And they Rob Walters actually does say in his affidavit that they had actually had a good working relationship, which reflects in some of the answers to some of the allegations later on, which I'll get to. Chair. Mm-hmm. Okay. So moving to allegation 13. In 2014 and 15 season, I quote, things started to become worse for me, where the ill treatment and the discrimination was worse. They wanted to give me a junior contract. I told them that I was not going to sign it, that I would rather retire from cricket and start an academy and further my studies. Because I was very tired with the treatment. I was getting all the yes, and they were still doing it. And this is found in the transcript, page 1271 to 1274. Chair, Mr. Balati alleges that he was earning about 300K during that period, which is 2014 and 2015 season. We have attached an annexure, of his contract to prove that he was actually earning not that, but 525K. I do have the contract here with me. In my file, I think the office had made a mistake and attached an incorrect contract. I'm not too sure if you received the correct one that highlights the 525K. But if I may just maybe pass it on to you, Chair.
What annexure would it be?
17.
That would be 17, yeah.
Okay.
And that's on page
It's on page 52.
Yeah. So that would be the contract that he received during 2014 and 2015 season.
So this one will be replacing this one here.
Correct, Chair.
So this will be the new Annexure 17.
Correct, Chair. Yeah. So it's very clear that he was actually earning 525 as opposed to the alleged 300K. His own benefit here. But I must say that, Titans, through obviously Dr. Fowl at the time took the initiative to get Mr. Pierre Joubert help in assisting Ethy to plan some of the celebrations or the honor of his benefit year. There was a dinner that was organized in honor of Mr. Ethy Balati at Supersport Park that both the CEO, who's Mr. Jacques Fowl, and the president at the time attended. And Mr. Balati was given an amount of 43,176.58 in his May 2014 salary as a benefit year by the union, and was also given the opportunity, or rather the resources, to plan his own benefit year. I must say, Chair, that how a player plans the benefit year and where he plans it, it's really up to the player. I believe that if Mr. Balati planned to celebrate it where he's from in, Polokwane or Palabora, and hence he was given transportation to actually plan it. From the invitations of players to how you want it to happen, it's solely a responsibility of the player. And I think perhaps there may have been a misunderstanding or a confusion as far as benefit year is concerned, where there was an expectation, obviously, from Mr. Balati that the union would then plan it for him, and which is not the case as far as benefit year is concerned. Nonetheless, it happened in Polokwane, and obviously not what Mr. Balati had expected from a turnout perspective and the quality of it as well. I must say that there were a few bad planned benefit years, and some of them by the white players. Actually, the bad ones by the white players, because Mr. Balati was the first and the last recipient who's black of the benefit year offered to him. So we had a few obviously bad planned benefit years that weren't successful. It's not just his, unfortunately, but I think he may have had a bigger expectation that the union would be a lot more involved in planning the benefit year. The only thing, obviously, that had happened was for the union to plan that dinner to honor him, and invite stakeholders, with the CEO giving a speech and the president as well, just to appreciate his work. It happened. It happened.
In the statement, he says that the CEO and the board members were not present.
So there's two things. The dinner that was before, obviously, so the benefit year, you organized in a cricket game. So the dinner, they were present. Matter of fact, they gave speeches in that dinner to honor Mr. Balati. They weren't present during the game itself. That was actually in Limpopo, and I'm not too sure why they weren't present. I would be lying to you, but it was planned out of town. But definitely they were there during the dinner. And like I said, it was for Mr. Balati to really, plan the whole thing. He may have perhaps expected, some support, or rather the Titans to plan it for him. I don't know if he knew that other players had to plan it themselves. But from his submissions, it seems like he had an expectation for the union to plan it. So obviously, clearly, somewhere there's been confusions and maybe a barrier of communication between the two parties. Does he have a right to be disappointed? Perhaps he does, because he's served for a long time, and maybe he was expecting them to be there. Were they invited? I'm not sure, to the benefit year, but I know that they were there during the honor, during that dinner that they honored him. And they raised sort of obviously this funds for him, to be paid as part of the 2014 May salary.
So what was the 43,000 rand for?
It was pretty much to say thank you.
And it had nothing to do with whether you throw a party thereafter or not.
No, not.
You could have just received the money and said thank you very much.
Correct.
And that would be the end of it.
Correct.
Well, I don't think there's pretty much more you can do. Well, I'm talking about myself. And 43,000 rand, I mean, that's pocket.
Correct, Chair. So
I can't see one organizing a party, let alone a celebratory party, from 43,000 rand, and it's enough. What year was this?
This was 2014, Chair.
Even in 2014.
So
43,000 rand.
So I need to clarify something, Chair. Maybe just to offer some clarity that the 43K was not for him to plan, and there's also an annexure. So the benefit is you organizing, the honor for you to organize yourself a cricket game where you can raise funds.
Yes.
So where you can obviously invite stakeholders and everybody else that you want to invite to it, and you then plan the whole thing. The dinner.
You've got 43,000 rand to plan it with.
Not for planning. That was just an incentive as far as the benefit year is concerned. But I need to refer to an annexure that was included in this by Mr. Pierre Joubert, who also had to plan his benefit year. I'll give you the page now.
Annexure 20.
84.
Yes.
So this pretty much refers to the 43,000 that came from fundraising from different stakeholders that bought tables during that dinner. So you'll see on the left, you've got SAB, you've got, matter of fact, this coach, Rob Walters, also contributed, or donated rather, by buying a table to support Mr. Balati, obviously in the benefit year. And you also have Northern's Cricket Union that contributed by buying a table. So tables were selling for 4,385 exclusive of VAT, and those are your stakeholders that bought tables, and the amount of 4,317,858 would then be the one that would be paid into Mr. Balati's salary, with Mr. Balati's salary.
So who had footed the bill for the dinner or whatever it was?
It was the union. It was the Titans. It was not Mr. Balati.